Okay, it looks like everyone is here. Well, thank you for joining us for the Data Teams, Their Roles in the Use of Data webinar. I'm India, your moderator, and we're excited to have Anne and Lisa here to present this information to you. A few logistics before we start though. If you look at your control panel, there's a question section. We encourage comments throughout the presentation, so please feel free to ask any questions, and I'll be sure to flag them for Lisa and Anne. Just below the question section, you'll find our handouts for the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we'll open up the floor for additional questions and comments. Our presenters will go over all of this with you as well. Now, without further ado, Anne, take it away.
Okay, hi. I am here with Lisa. Sweet. Here we are. We're not going to put the camera on because, you know why.
Hello, everybody. Welcome.
We are both from Demonstrated Success, and we're going to talk about data and data teams today. The goals for the day are to explore different types of data teams for educational purposes, review different types of school data, and then I want to show you a way to look at data a little differently than you probably have been, or maybe than you have been. And as India said, please ask questions. I hope you can find the little questions section on your control panel. And India and Lisa we'll all be monitoring for questions, so definitely ask questions. And actually, to start, I'd love, instead of a question for you, if you have a question, please ask it, but I'd love for you to send in what you hope to get out of this, what you were hoping that this webinar would tell you, because if I hadn't planned to tell you whatever you write, I will try and fit it in. Oh yes, I think India said this too, that you're on mute. You guys are all on mute. All the attendees are on mute, because if everybody wasn't on mute, it would start getting very loud. Here's the agenda. The first thing I'm going to do is show you how to access some of the resources that we have. So before we talk about data teams and data, I'm just going to go to our website and show you how to get in there. So I actually have to get out of the PowerPoint. Yeah, okay. And I'm going to go to, if you want to find some materials, some resources that have to do with this and other things like PLCs and data dives and other things, I'll show you when we get there. So you go to demonstratedsuccess.com and member login. Now, if you aren't a member, that's fine. You can just click on this little question mark here, and it will bring you to the instructions on how to sign up. I think there's one error in it, but I think you can probably work your way around it. So that's how you get the instructions. Once you actually get an ID and password, you can log in. And it may or may not bring you to this screen, but where you want to go is resources and discussions. And in here are a whole bunch of resources. So some information we had last year on culture and climate panel, competency and proficiency based, PLC protocols, all this is out here. And the webinar will be under here. So I'll put all the information under here at the end of the webinar. But there are a bunch of handouts. I'm just going to tell you what they are right now. So actually, that's the whole thing on how you get to our website and find information. Back to the PowerPoint. If you look at the handouts, we have a few handouts. There's an assessment inventory for districts. I'll talk about that. There's a data inventory, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Data teams and types of data, PPTX. That's the PDF of this PowerPoint. And the other two documents, I know one of them is from Achieve the Core. I'm not sure if both of them are, but they're pretty good resources that talk about data teams and looking at data. So if you get a chance, you could look at those, but you can certainly download all that information. Okay, access to resources, we're done. Data teams. So for educational purposes, there are basically 3 different types of data teams. There can be, and there aren't in every school, a district data team, a school data team, and a grade level or a subject data team. And the reason I say grade level or subject for elementary school, since the elementary school teachers are the ones who teach everything, they would be a grade team. And in middle school and high school, they teach one subject pretty much at a time. So it would be the ELA teachers that get together or the science teachers that get together. I'd love to hear, so does anybody, if you type this into questions, do you have data teams in your school? So everybody can just type in, yes, I have this, no, I don't, we don't have any, or I'll just wait a second. Okay, yes, yep, district, we have grade, no, subject, grade level, we have grade level. So lots of grade levels only, that's interesting. And school teams, grade level and school teams. Okay, thank you. So there are some in other grade levels. So it does look like a lot of people have grade level teams, which is great. And that's probably from the big push of PLCs a few years ago. And I think all these data teams, if you don't have the grade level, subject level data teams, nothing seems to move forward. So they really are the most important, I think. So it's good to know that a lot of you have these already. A lot of questions about why would you have a data team? And here's a whole list. So you want to answer questions. You have tons of data. What are you doing with all this data? You want to address areas of need. You want to work on student improvement, monitoring progress. So there are lots of reasons to have data teams. And you as an individual person could look at this data, but first of all, you might not have access. But if you have access, you could just look at it, and that might answer your questions. But in order to make some differences in the school, you've got to get a bunch of people looking at data. And the main reason we have data teams, or the main reason we look at data, is to answer questions. If I didn't have a question, I wouldn't be looking to data to answer it. So each team really needs to have some kind of questions to have answered by the data. And if they have data out there that they're not looking at, that's one of the things that should be addressed, and we'll talk about that. If you're creating assessment data or some other kind of data that you're never using, you should stop, because it's just extra work for everybody. So I have another question for you. What kind of questions would you be trying to answer as a district team or a school team or a grade level team? And I'll wait a second while people start answering questions. How are my students doing? Did we meet our goals? Are people safe? Student growth? Student progress? Is the curriculum meeting our needs? Financial data would be important, yeah.
Improving interventions as well.
Yeah, how do we use data to improve tier 1? So that's, yeah. Yes, so those are, we have lots of questions here, and I'm actually, if you have more, just send them on, but I'll hear some more. Are your programs aligned? Are we teaching what's assessed? That's a good one.
You can get feedback on a new program. That's another one.
Yeah. So we do have lots of questions, and you really can't answer these questions, a lot of them, without looking at the data. Graduation rate, you've got to have some kind of data in order to determine that. So I have a list here of different questions a district might be asking. How are my schools doing? Do people feel safe? Do teachers want to work here? And if we keep having, if there's a large turnover, we might want to investigate that. So we could put together a survey. So these are all the different kinds. School data, it's kind of the same. School data and district data, you kind of have the same questions. You might be looking at, as a district, you might look at all your school's data at once. As a school, you just look at your own school, or you'd look at your school and compare it to something, probably the state. Your goals would probably be different. but basically they're the same kinds of questions. Oops. But as a data team or I call it a data team, a grade level team or a subject level team, you're really going to start looking at student data. So how are my students doing? And you want to know, are my students' families engaged? And how do you know that? You may not be able to tell. You might have to create a survey for that. Are we meeting our goals? How can I help my students? Which goes back to what somebody wrote about looking at tier 1 improvement. Am I teaching the standard? Somebody brought that up.
Lost the volume.
Yep. You lost the volume. Somebody wrote and said, I lost volume. Can you hear? Is it because I'm not talking loud enough? Is that better? Hopefully, if you can't hear me, let me type in some more, so I'll do something about that. So did my students learn what I taught them? Have you ever heard, so did you teach, or did Joey learn to add? Well, I taught it to him. Well, you may have taught it, but he didn't learn it. So you want to know if what you're teaching is actually being absorbed by your students, and you need to look at some kind of data. It doesn't have to be a test, an actual test. It could just be an observation, but you have some kind of data has to be there to look at. It doesn't look, somebody's lost volume. Somebody's asking about it. I don't think anybody else has lost volume. So if more than one person has, please let me know if you haven't already. Data teams, those are the types of data teams. And in different schools, different districts, they meet different numbers of times, once a month, twice a year. Some schools have them, or some districts have trimester meetings, so they look at all the student data, all the student assessment data every trimester, and the whole team looks together. So they're all set up very differently, and it really depends on what your questions are and what you're trying to find out. Do you have more questions about data teams? Or not more, we didn't have any yet. All right, I'm going to go into types of data. There are a whole bunch of different types of data, and I just listed a few because I'm sure there are many, many more. Do we have any questions before I go on? I don't want to. Okay.
Trying to get her back on the phone.
Lots of types of data. So we have assessment results, which is really, when we're talking about grade level, subject level teachers, that's the data we're looking at, and that's the data that the state is looking at, and we try and hope that you pay attention to the assessment results, and we'll talk about that a little bit. There's climate and culture data. A lot of times those are survey data. It's very important. You can also look at attendance of teachers, attendance of students, which might have to do with your climate and your culture. You'd have to look into that. You could have a list of questions. That could be data. Survey data. There's certainly demographic data, graduation rate data. Lots of data. And if you have other ideas to put in here, just send them on. And actually, I had the question, what do you have for data that you use or don't use? I'll wait a second, see what people say. Are you actually using data? Are you frustrated because you know there's data out there and you're not getting to it?
Like test scores.
SAS scores, yeah, test scores, STAR, NEWA, SAT. So a lot of those are all, yeah, we've got assessment data, lots of assessment data. Are you using that data? So that's always the question. The kids, we spend the whole end of the year taking tests, or the kids spend the end of the year taking tests. And very often the teachers don't even have time to look at the data, which can be very frustrating. So time needs to be given. We have lots, but it's hard to interpret, which is true. I'm going to talk a little bit about interpreting data, but not a lot, but I can go more into it. And if that's something you want to do, I can go into a little bit more about interpreting some data. I don't know how to interpret all, but like the SAS data is sometimes hard to interpret. So there are different teams use different data. obviously. We talked about that. But the two things you really have to do first are figure out what kind of data do you have. So what kind of student assessment data do you have? And what kind of program or curriculum do you have? So curriculum is, I go back and forth on that word. Sometimes it's a curriculum plan that a district puts together, and sometimes it's the purchased math program. Probably when I'm using it today, it's going to be the purchased program that I'm talking about. So you look at assessment results, demographic data, climate and culture, student engagement, and other data. But the two main things I want to start with are student assessment data and program and curriculum inventory data. This would be a really good thing for a district to do or a school to do. What are all the assessments that your people take? I think I have, so this is a sample of a document that's attached. This is one of the handouts. It's a sample of a document you can use or you can come up with your own, but it's an assessment inventory. What kind of assessments are your students taking? How many, how often, when, who's requiring it? So here we've got end of units. Is there a purpose? Hopefully. The type of assessment, is it required? Required by the principal. Some things are required by the school board. STAR very often, or STAR or NEWA, they're required by school boards or districts. The math program or the reading program may have assessments. When are they administered? Are they all at the same time? You might want to look at that. But you want to go through and see how many assessments you have and are you really using that data. You also want to look at the programs that you have. We're very often asked for information on, do we have any questions?
I still can't get her on the volume, but the questions are fine. They have a lot of data that they need to look through and they, that we talked about.
Yeah.
So those are the other questions.
Okay. All right. So this is a program inventory. So I'm going to back up. We often get called and people ask for intervention programs that we recommend. And the first thing I suggest is that people go into their schools and see what do you have? What do you have? What have you purchased over the years that's sitting in the closets? And maybe those are good. And very often they do have some that they can use. So getting a handle on all the programs and curriculum packages that you've purchased over the years is a really good idea. And you can use this document, some other document. Here's a sample. So we've got Everyday Math. It's a math program. These are the years. These two schools use it. Our school C doesn't use it. What's great about it? What's an area of need? And any comments? We use foundations, reading. I mean, you could just list a whole bunch of things here. Even the the online services. I don't know if Alex is available anymore, but all the online programs that you use could go in here. It's just something you want to see. You want to get a whole picture of what's going on in your district or your school. So that would be one way to collect data. Do I have that twice? Oh, now I'm into the data. So this is the next sheet, and it's a data inventory. Do I have one filled in? I can't remember. Yes, I do. So a data inventory template. So this, I don't think we did attach this one, did we?
We did.
This
is also attached.
So the you want to then move to what kind of data do you have? So you've got assessment data, which is the type of data is AD. If you look way at the bottom here, you can see assessment data. Here's a key, demographic data, and so on. So what kind of data do you have? Just collect it just to see what's out there. And then if you have some questions, will this data answer your questions? If not, where are you going to get that information? Or are you collecting data that you really aren't using? And you want to determine that. And this is a template you can use or not use, but recommendations. You've got some data. The recommendation is stop using it. Why? Because we never use it. We don't ever look at it. We give the kids a test. We never look at it. Whose authority are we going on? And that's going to be district dependent. And when did you decide? And how are you going to get rid of it? How are you going to stop using it? You might have to have a plan. So it's good to have a recommendation about the programs you might get rid of and data assessments you might get rid of, or other sources of data that you might get rid of or look for. This is one of the documents that's attached. It's about inventory for schools and districts for data. But this is strictly for student assessment inventory. So you could look through that. It's 10 or 12 pages, but it's kind of interesting. So before I move on, I want to see if we have any questions about types of data, just sort of high-level types of data.
And are there types of data that you are using or collecting that we haven't mentioned?
And we are gonna go into STAR and NEWA and list all those kinds in a minute. But are you looking at some data that's different than things we have mentioned? It's a good question. No answers, so I guess we'll move on. So we must have covered everything that anybody wanted.
I think we got it all.
So we haven't had any questions about, or nobody has written what they were hoping to get out of this before the end, so we can make sure that we cover it. But I'm going to continue.
And you can ask questions anytime.
Yes, do, because we're watching. So I'm going to talk about the different types of assessment data, which is the kind of data I really like to look at. So we know we have state assessment data. We've got SAS, the SAT. We used to have NECAP. We used to have SBAC. I think really the state data for New Hampshire now is SAS and SAT, and that's really it. Then there are national assessment data like NEWA data, STAR data. What else? I know there's iReady. I can't think of any others.
I can't either at the moment.
If you have others, just you can let me know. And
I mean, SAT is as well.
SAT is actually national data because it's nationally, right, that's true. So there's the SAT that all students have to take, and many students take it again for college purposes, or they use that particular score. But then we get to local assessment data, and not everybody has local data. And not everybody uses the results from their local data either. But I think it's one of the most effective ways to improve instruction if you can get assessments that are aligned with the standards. So if you look at the local assessment data, I say F&P and DRA. Those aren't assessments that were created locally. Those are assessments that if you use them, you purchased that from someone, but you corrected it yourself. So the data is not nationally normed. It's just data that you have corrected and entered into some system or put on paper and looked at. That's why it's a local assessment. But there are also locally created assessments that you can collect data on. I'm going to talk about looking at the data now. So there are a whole bunch of different ways to look at data, and the state data, most of you or some of you probably have seen these results. You can look at the state assessment data, the SAS data on the portal. If you have access to students, you can see the results. You can dig in more deeply on these, and if you want to, I can probably show you how to do that. But this is just these are overall scores. And yes, these are actually real scores. This one's, it is possible to score that high and even higher. And this particular school has been, or this particular district has been following the PLC process and looking at data pretty consistently for a few years. So their scores have been rising. Here's some national data. I think this is STAR data. Yeah, STAR. So this is student data from the STAR report. More STAR reports. So you can look at data in the STAR system. NEWA data. I think this is NEWA data. State testing. I don't know. I think it's NEWA. But you can have the report. They might group students together for you based on their criteria. You can actually go down and look at detail of your word families. So some of you have probably seen this type of data. Then we have local assessments that you made, or you are actually going to give to the kids and you're going to correct them. And after you correct them, you might actually go and look at the data and do this. So you might say, okay, Susie and Jose and Bill and Kathy and all those people are all set. Those 4 students under the needs help side need some help. So I'm going to work with those 4 students. And that's traditionally how we've done it. We've given a test and we've looked at the results and we've decided that some kids need help, some don't. And we either help them or we don't. Very often we just give them the grade and that's the end of it. I mean, that hasn't been going on that much for a lot of years, but still, I think at the higher grades, especially when you're getting grades for your subjects, you look at the reports or you look at the assessment results, and you either have time to help the students or you don't. But what happens when it's like this? When you give an assessment, and this is the way the results fall. So this time, most of your students need help, and only 4 of them are all set. That's a whole nother situation. And in that case, something different has to be done. You could say, okay, well, I better go help all these kids. But you also should think, something I was teaching didn't get across correctly, or the assessment wasn't assessing what I was teaching. That could be too. But if the assessment is good and was assessing what I thought I had taught, I need to go back and look at what I was teaching. Because if that many kids got it wrong, there's something that I did incorrectly. So you do want to do that. Yeah, I could have probably skipped this one. I was going to say, well, normally we would divide them like this. We'd work with the kids who needed addition help, and we'd work with the kids who needed subtraction help. But I'm going to forget that. So what would be a really important thing to do with your assessment data is to look at what went well and what needs improvement of instruction, not for the kids. You have to look at how the kids did, because we want individual kids to have attention and we want to pay attention to what they need. But we also need to look at what we're doing and what needs improvement for us. So here's a sample of, wait, I'm going to take a breath. I feel like I'm just talking. Do we have any questions before I'm taking my break here? Okay.
Yeah. Take a drink.
Get a drink. Okay. This is a sample of an SAS report from Performance Plus. How many people have Performance Plus? If you could just put a P plus or yes in there while I'm talking, that'd be great. Performance Plus will give you some nice detail on.
A few of them do have that.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good. You can get it different ways, but it's really more and more.
Yeah,
you can get some good detail out of Performance Plus, the way the data is in there and the way it's reported. And in a report like this is, I don't know what grade it is, but it's the reading data from the SAS, and it's the key details, literary key details, informational text key details, and then literary again. That doesn't make sense. This is all key details. Okay, what was I thinking? Let me think. Key details. These must be for different grades. Each one. Actually, I wish I didn't have this example because it's not a very good one. It should say something like, here's key details for literary. Here's what comes at
informational text.
And then key details for informational text. And then can anybody else tell me the different categories? I can't think of it. I'm a math person. But you could get each cluster of standards on a line here. And by looking at the report, where blue is the highest and red is the lowest, you could actually say, oh, my students did super well on this section right here. But my student, what is this from? My students, let's see, look at this one. They didn't do so well on this. There's an awful lot of red. Has somebody come up with those? Or maybe different years. That's true. Thank you. This could be different years. I can't remember. I'm sorry that I can't remember. I just took this from a clip.
Oh, yeah, they are all different years, 16,
oh, yes.
18.
Thank you. So that's what it is. Thank you very much. That was Larry who gave me that. Thank you. So this is this 2016 key details, and 2000 informational and literary, 2017 informational and or literary and informational, and then key details. This is informational RI, reading informational and reading literature, key details.
So another way to use it is looking at trends over time, which this one would be.
Right. Not the greatest
Not a
trend.
positive trend.
Right. The problem is, see these little ones, when you're looking at P plus data, this is a 1 and this is an 8. So this was only worth 1 point in 2016, which isn't really possible with the way this data is. So this is from SBAC.
Yeah, they changed the test in there.
Yeah,
too.
so it got we went from SBAC to SAS, so things changed a little bit. And here, this is where it is right now. So this key details is worth 6 to 8 points currently, and on this year's test. And
here is a question: does this data compare same group of students across the years?
It can. This probably does not, but you certainly can in P plus look at the same students across the years. So I could look at how they did in 3rd grade, how they did in 4th grade, how they did in 5th grade, etc. And in general, a group of students that's high will remain high. But if your school is big enough, if you have more than 50 kids in a grade, that isn't what ends up happening if you look at the data. What ends up happening is the same skill or the same target or area or cluster this is low year after year after year, which is really when the teachers have to look at it and go, okay, I'm a 5th grade teacher. Every year, no matter what my students are, they may score higher or lower, but this is my lowest area. So as a 5th grade teacher, this is what you need to work on. You need to look at what are the standards that this is referring to. Do you really understand the standards? Is your program teaching those standards? And figure it out that way. So it is good to look at your students, your cohorts of students. But it's really more important for improvement to schools to look at the same grades over and over. Did that make sense? So yes, you can compare in P plus, Performance Plus, you can compare almost anything. So you definitely compare cohorts and different years, different tests. So that's one way to look at the data. Overall, what went well and what needs improvement. You can also, here's a report that comes out of the ORS that actually will give you standards data. So use the 4 operations, I think this is 4th grade math. Use the 4 operations with whole numbers to solve problems. That's a cluster of standards. The standards are these. And the way the ORS reports this is these, I didn't put the key in, so that's not good. But these were all above standard, at or near or above. And this was a low area compared to the rest of the test of your students. So it doesn't compare it to anybody else, but this right here with the minus sign is the lowest area. All these other ones are kind of in the middle of where your kids scored. And if you had a standard that kids were exceptional on, there would be a plus sign there. I think the standard level is a little bit low. I mean, it's a really small piece of data to look at. So I like to look at the cluster level, but you certainly can look at standards and work on individual standards. Here's another way to look at what went well and what needs improvement. So this is looking at, it's an item analysis by question. So I can look at this question. It's a multiple choice question. The answer is D, and most of my students chose G. That's good. That's good to know. Whatever that question is, I must have taught it well. Yay me. So then here's one. The answer is, this is all multiple choice. The answer is A, but quite a few students chose B, and a couple chose C. So I want to look at that question and go, well, what was that question, and why did so many kids choose B? And I bet when you look at it, you go, oh, that's because I said XYZ last week, and they misinterpreted it. So you really should go back and, if it's an important standard, and reteach that a little bit and explain it. And here's one.
Where can you get the item level analysis here?
Well, if you want it to look like this is from Performance Plus.
Okay.
So you can get an item analysis from other sources. You could do it in Excel, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But this particular report comes from Performance Plus.
Okay. Thank you. That was a question.
So here's the same situation. Actually, on this second one, it could have been they didn't know the answer, so they just randomly picked them, but that would make them all sort of look even. But here's another one. The answer was C. More people picked D. So you might really want to go back and say, what is that question? Why did they pick D? So item analysis is very good, and it's more for, you want to look at how a student answered a question to work with the student, but you want to look at how your whole grade or whole class did to analyze how you're doing. This is one of my favorite reports, and this is the one that it's an item analysis by student, really. So if you look at, here are all the students, they're sorted from the highest score to the lowest score. All their answers are in here. Some are points, some are multiple choice. Questions across the top. And you can see that this is question 10, question 1, 3, they're not in order sequentially. They are in order of the question that most students got right to what most students got wrong. So this is a really fun little thing you can do. You can print out each question, put them around the room, and see if you can see similarities. Go ahead, I think we have a question.
There is a question. All of these are individual students.
Yes.
Each John Smith is an individual
Yes,
John Smith.
sorry, yes. They are different. We have lots of John Smiths in this school.
Correct.
Yes, so these are each individual students. So when you get a report like this, you kind of want to go, okay, they didn't, 13%, oh my God, they didn't get that at all. So I better go look and see what that is. But I strongly suggest that you look at the highest first, because you want to go, oh good, we did that really well. So we looked at the highest. Multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. 100% of them got that question right. Yay, that's really good. So whatever the standard that was for. Second one, comparing two fractions. Whoops, that arrow's not quite in the right place. 75% of the students got this one right, which isn't super high, but it's my second highest. And then, ooh, the arrows are way off, sorry. So the third highest was this one, number 3, and again, 75%, and it was about dividing within 100. So yay, we did really well on this, on teaching these. I knew they knew it. Okay, now let's look at the other side. So the third one over, which would be this one, multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. Wait a minute. They got 100% on that one. This can't be right. So actually, and then you can see it's comparing fractions and dividing within 100. This actually happened, and it was I was working with a 5th grade class when this happened. And of course, it was, well, the data is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. It's all a waste. We collected it wrong. So we went through all that. And then we finally stopped and we really looked at what was going on. And does anybody want to guess what was happening here? Because this really was what the data was.
And where does this report come from?
This is a report that came from Excel. So
Okay.
Teachers actually entered in the data by themselves, question by question.
Okay.
So people are guessing. Was it a word problem? No, word problem on the low end. They were all word. This particular assessment were all word problems. More words. Just so somebody said, were there more words on the lower end than on the higher end?
Was it a 2-step problem?
Were there 2-step problems? And actually, they were all fairly similarly leveled questions. They just had the different types of computation. And I will tell you what ended up, we took all the questions, we laid them on the floor in order of highest to lowest, and we looked and we looked and we looked. And what we finally saw was that the top 3 all had pictures drawn for them. The bottom 3 just had words with no pictures. So what we realized was we had to go and teach these kids how to draw pictures. So if we had looked at the low end first and said, oh my God, only 44% of them could multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. Wait a minute, I know they can do that. Oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated. I know I've taught this. I know that I've seen them do it. And then you go comparing 2 fractions. I know they can do it. But by looking at the top end first, we could see that they did know how to do it, but something was wrong. And what it was teaching them how to draw pictures. It wasn't teaching them math again. It was teaching how to solve word problems, really. So it's very useful to look at this kind of detail. Are there any questions before I move on to data?
No new question.
Okay, so this There were a couple questions about where did we get this report, this one. And this is created in Excel, and if you want help with Excel, you could send us an email and we can help you with that.
And this is also, if you were doing, you could use this for a competency-based assessment. So you could have your different competencies and set up an Excel spreadsheet like that and check all your kids off as they achieve that competency.
Yep. So I love Excel. Some people hate it, but I love it. So we already looked there. Any more questions? A lot of districts and schools and grade level teams and subject level teams will start the process of looking at data, and after a little while it goes away. People stop looking at it. The number one reason, I think there are really two reasons. One is time. Teachers need the time to go through the data. If we're talking about assessment data, they need time to look at it. They need time to write the assessments, to look at the questions, to look at the results, to enter the data, to create the reports. It's time consuming, and the teachers need the time. It's not going to happen if they don't have time. So sometimes whole schedules have to be changed in order to give them time, or they have to come in early one day, and then according to union contracts, they can leave early on another day, or some way the time has to be there, and it can't just be once a month. It's got to be more often. The other major idea or major thing to sustain the process is administration buy-in and involvement. If the administrators haven't bought in and they aren't involved, it doesn't happen. It just goes by the wayside. There's so much going on. If administration hasn't bought in, the teachers aren't going to have the time to do it. They're not going to be given the time. So those are the two most important things to get the data teams going and to sustain it. For monitoring, I think I put this on the next one. No, I'm going to just quickly go over this cycle here. So this is really the cycle. You begin by identifying essential learning, which is either the Common Core for math and ELA. And for science, it's the Next Gen standards. And for social studies, it's New Hampshire social studies. Yeah, I don't know what they are. Or it's your competencies. And it has to be some subset. You can't really do this with every single standard. You have to explicitly teach it, then assess it, and then you have to look at the data. You can't just say, okay, taught, assessed, on to the next. You have to look at the data. Engage in the rigorous reflection of what happened. Did they do well? Did I misteach something? You have to make sound choices, and sometimes you can, Joey got a 0 on this test, but I know he was sick. Or Billy, he got an 80, or he got most of these right, but I know he's still struggling with subtraction. So you have to use some of your professionalism and know all of what you know about your students. Then collaboratively talk about what you're going to do differently. If there are 3 teachers in one class, the kids were able to compare fractions better than in the other class, then one of the teachers can give her ideas, and that everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, so sharing their ideas is what's important. Then you have to monitor and assess what's going on, give some more instruction, and then test it again. Did they improve? Hopefully. And usually at this point, even if they didn't improve, you have to move on, which is too bad, or if 3 of them still didn't get it, you still have to move on, which is sad, but that's the way it works. And the cycle goes on. So you're continually revisiting and reflecting and revising. So as far as sustaining and monitoring it, grade and subject teams need time to go through it. Administration needs to be involved, and somebody needs to be reviewing this. So when I say they're involved, somebody's got to be saying, okay, show me what you did this month, or show me your results this month, or show me your assessment this month. Somebody has to be watching, or it doesn't get done. And I don't mean like, Big Brother watching, but if it doesn't seem like it's important to administration, it's not going to happen. Oh, and these are some results of a school that followed this for years. So each one of these is a year. So they were scoring in the 50s, and they did this for about 6 years, and they ended up scoring up here. This was their all students, and this is reading. The last one was math. These are their economically disadvantaged students who also showed huge growth. And this was economically disadvantaged for reading. I don't know what happened this year, but there was huge growth using this approach to really looking at student data. Phew. I
Yeah,
feel like I talked as fast as I could.
I know. And you're in.
So are there any questions? Actually, I was going to wrap up. So we talked about data teams, the district, school, and grade level and subject level. Different types of data, and I only listed a few here, but there are as many as you can think of. When you're looking at data, look at it differently than you usually do. Look at it from the eye of what did I teach well and what do I need to improve? That's how instruction changes. That's how schools gain points on the tests. And then it has to be sustained and it needs to be monitored or people just give up on it. Are there any questions before we wrap up here?
Let's see. I know you're really coming in.
No more questions? Okay.
Oh, is this going to be, can we access this at a later time?
Yes, this will be put on the resources. If you remember how we got to resources, you will be able to, actually you can't look at the webinar to figure out how to get to resources because it won't work with it.
A little question.
You could send us an email if you can't remember, but we will post this up on our website, so you will be able to watch it again if you want to. You can also write to us. These are our email addresses, or call us, and our phone number's on there. But if you write to us, we'll give you our phone number. And that's all. So yes, it is recorded. Anything else?
Yeah, let's see.
We'll stay on for a couple minutes. And if you want to talk, we'll even unmute you. So thank you very
Why
much
don't we do that?
for attending. And if you want to be unmuted, you could just ask and we'll unmute you. So we'll stay here for a couple minutes. Thank you for joining us.